listeners. Welcome back to the Flipping the Bird podcast. I'm your host, Luke Lawhorn, the current sports editor at the UTSA student newspaper, the Paisano. The first couple of weeks back on the podcast have been a lot of fun, and now after the second week of college football and the NFL's return, we couldn't just limit ourselves to one episode a week. So here with me to give our immediate reactions post-Saturday and Sunday's games are Rylan, Nick, Aramis, Brandon, Connor. How are you doing?
Oh man, I'm doing great. Had a great weekend of watching sports, watching the beloved game of football. Very excited to be here and discuss some topic with y'all.
Connor, of course, I'm so glad football season's back in full swing. It's exciting. This is my favorite time of year. Christmas, Halloween, it's all coming here, but I don't give a shit. I don't care about any of those. It's football season.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy that football's back, but I'm also not. I'm going through the 5 stages of grief right now, but yeah, overall, pretty good.
How are you guys doing? I'm back after almost 2 weeks, and I'm ready. I'm ready to talk some college football, and I'm also ready to talk some NFL football as well.
All right. Hey, everyone. My name is Brandon. I'm back this week, and this time I'm going to be talking throughout the whole episode rather than just the end. I do have some interesting topics to bring up. It was a very interesting weekend for both NFL and college football, and I'm just happy to start talking with you all.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here with y'all, ready to dive into all this past football action from this past weekend. It was a lot of fun. Of course, our team, UTSA, did win the I-35 rivalry this past weekend. It was a great game. It was a much-needed game, bouncing back after a Week 1 loss. I feel like there's nobody else better to start with than Rylan, who was at the game, covered it, watched it live, was tweeting about it, which, by the way, follow our Twitter at Paisano_sports, trying to get that popping. So, yeah, Rylan, what were your takeaways from Saturday's game?
Well, it's good to get a win, especially against a rival like that. The offense did struggle, relative to what we're used to seeing, only 20 points against the Texas State team that gave up, definitely 30-plus to Baylor. So, some bad injury news with Frank Harris. He went down and then came back in and then went down again. And they brought the card out for him to the locker room, but he didn't take it in. So that's good. He came back in, finished it out. But, the atmosphere was electric for sure. And Texas State fans did contribute to that. But, but more of what we saw from Week 1, the offense struggled with creativity. The defense was great once again, and part of that was thanks to Trey Moore, who had 3 sacks, American Conference Defensive Player of the Week. But yeah, it was a good tough win versus a rival, and we'll take those when we can get them.
Yeah, I have to agree with Rylan. It was definitely not the strongest offensive performance, I could say, but I think there was improvement. I think Harris obviously showed a lot of character coming back out and finishing that game and finished pretty strong. The thing that I was honestly impressed with is that I noticed we have 3 running backs now that are honestly very solid. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Kavorian Barnes, 26 carries, 103 yards, leading rusher on the night for UTSA. Rocco Griffin had that touchdown. And then Robert Henry, the JUCO transfer. So it's like a 3-headed monster at running back, and I think we can really utilize that to our advantage. Defense, obviously, Trey Moore. I mean, what can you say about him, man? A local kid. He's a monster. He's a beast. UTSA, we have to keep a hold because there's going to be bigger programs trying to get him. Got to keep a hold of him because he's like one of the centerpieces of the defense. Mm-hmm. But overall, I think it was a tough win. It wasn't, the prettiest win, but it's a tough win against a Texas State team that showed a lot of improvement. So.
I would say one thing: 5-0, 5-0 in the last 5 matchups against Texas State. This ain't no rivalry. I don't think so. With that record, nah, not me. Theme of the game: defense. This was a defensive battle all 4 quarters. And I think that's going to be the theme going through to the end of the season. Is I think our defense is going to carry us, keeping these future matchups close. I think everybody who was at the stadium, we were all worried when we saw Frank Harris go down. Not once, but twice. But he came back. I don't know what they did. Our trainers did some magic back there, that's for sure.
So I'm going to have to echo what these guys said. The offense struggled a little bit. As Nick said, Frank Harris went down, but he came back in the game, put up 214 passing yards and 1 touchdown. My biggest takeaway from this game is that it shouldn't have been as close. We ran 33 more plays than Texas State did and had over 100 more yards of offense and only beat them by 7 points. It's amazing that we held them to only 13 points. The defense played incredibly. As you guys said, Trey Moore, 7 total tackles, 3 sacks, an incredible game. Avery Morris as well also had a good game, 3 tackles and 1 sack. The defense as a whole totaled 6 sacks. And we're facing Army on Friday. If this defense can play like that against Army, there's no way we lose on Friday.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the defense over the weekend going against Texas State. I agree with you. It's not a rivalry. It's 5-0. No one can call that a rivalry at all. And being that they just came off a win versus Baylor, I think it makes UTSA look even better. Not saying Baylor's even worse, but they also took a loss this weekend. And I would say that with Frank Harris going 26 for 37, no interceptions, overall 70% passing completions, with a couple injuries, I think he did really well. And I'm excited to see if he returns for the Army game. Other than that, I think he played really well and defense really stepped up.
I don't know, man. I can't really get behind the it's not a rivalry thing. Well, because first, I'm from Killeen, Texas. I feel like 75% of that school is people who went to our school and we grew up with.
Right.
So I'm not really behind that. And by the way, from this spot, how far Bobcat Stadium is, Texas State football, where they play, you know how far? It is 1 hour and 1 minute away. I mapped it literally when we got here. So I know it's 5-0. You can say it's not a competitive rivalry because it's not competitive, obviously 5-0. Right. But when it's a rival and it's just nothing better than beating up on them, like winning, talking mess on Twitter, online. I mean, it's a rivalry. I feel like it's kind of embedded when you're a Texas State football school, whether it's with Houston or North Texas, Texas State, UT last year. But yeah, you guys, obviously hit the nail on the head with this takeaway from Saturday's game. Trey Moore having 3 sacks. That was crazy. I saw that we had 7 sacks, school record, led by Trey Moore. Yes, he was American Defensive Player of the Week. Great takeaway. But honestly, I just think we're better than Texas State. I knew after a bad week 1 loss, Coach Traylor, who I think is a great coach, there's no way he's losing a second straight game at home. Now they're pissed off. I knew we were going to, go in there at least with the right game plan. Thankfully, we executed enough with Trey Moore's help, and everybody else on the defense. Frank Harris had a tutty. He came back, did a little better than his week 1 performance. But really, I just think Texas State was riding a little in. They were riding too hot from that Baylor game. If you look against Baylor, they had 143 rushing yards against Baylor, but they had 31 rushing yards against UTSA. So they were running all over Baylor 2 weeks ago now. And because Baylor lost a bunch of their staff and Texas State, has this new coach and all these new veteran players with the whole offseason to prepare. I knew they were going to, they could be competitive against the Baylor, but, lasting into week 2 against a good coach is pretty hard to do. But I'll be completely honest with y'all. That all said, I do have us losing Army next week, as I've said these last couple episodes. I still have us losing Army. I'm getting laughs all over the table. Can someone, starting with you, Rylan, can you tell me why that's such a funny take?
It's Army, dude. Like that's like they're just like I don't. This might be like a little disrespectful, but like I don't like view them as like a real program. I just think they're like kind of just there, And we played them last year. Yeah, they gave us a good fight or whatever, but we were always gonna win.
I get that, but they beat us 2 years ago, and last year went to overtime. Brandon, you have something?
Yeah, I was gonna chime in because last week I didn't get to give my take for what I think UTSA will go on. I honestly, this is going to be a hot take, but I think we're going 8-4. I have us losing also to Army, being that it was a close game last year. I see you making faces, but a couple years ago we lost to them. Last year was a very tough match. They played it down to the wire. The last play, I believe, was a touchdown, right? And so I've got us losing to Army, UAB, Tennessee, and Tulane. Again, going 8-4. I would love to see us beat Army. It might be a close one, but again, I wouldn't be surprised if Army showed out.
I just think it's one of those games where like we just have too many. Our talent is just so much better than theirs. And our coaching, our talent is just it wouldn't make sense for us to lose. We still have Frank Harris. We have Warren Wise. We have 3 good running backs. We might have Clark back. We have Willie McCoy. We have Joshua Suehs. It's just, and our defense is better than it was last year. I just don't see them making it close this year.
Right. And then last year, would you say we also had the same talent or even more talent?
No, I think we have a little less this year.
Oh, so a little less. Okay, so with a tight game like last year, and now we have a little less talent.
I'm calling it luck last year.
Okay.
I think it was
last
fake.
year, I think, was all Frank Harris putting on magic in
Yeah.
the fourth quarter. I mean, we had the most comeback wins in the fourth quarter of anyone in the Conference USA last year, top 5 in the nation. Every fourth quarter seemed like we were coming back. But I don't. Did anyone see Army win 57-0 2 days ago?
Destroyed Delaware State.
It was against Delaware State. I'd be the first to
FCS
say
school.
that. But 57-0. I mean, that's got to amount for something, right, Nick?
I mean, it shows that they can beat FCS talent,
Yeah.
Okay.
but we are an FBS school here at UTSA. Our defense, again, I think our defense is top notch in the American this year. I think we can shut down. I think we can keep Army under 20 points coming up on Friday.
Okay, well, we'll talk more about UTSA and the Army game in this upcoming Wednesday's episode. As preview for Friday's game, by the way, it is on a Friday. But now I kind of want to switch gears here, sticking with college football, but kind of follow up and pick up where we left off last episode. Last week we closed out that episode briefly, kind of giving our cold take of the upcoming Texas and Alabama game. Obviously, here on Monday, now we know that Rylan and I were wrong about Bama handling business. Or was it Nick?
It was
I'm
me.
sorry. It was Nick and I.
I was
Rylan
Mr.
was correct.
Negativity.
Yeah, Mr. Negativity and I were wrong about Bama handling business against Texas. But as we discussed here 2 days removed, it turns out the number 11 Longhorns went into Tuscaloosa and slapped number 3 Alabama in their building for 2.5 hours for the final score of 34-24. Before I give my takes on the game, Connor, would you like to give your Texas Longhorns some praise?
Absolutely. First thing I want to say, Quinn Ewers proving the doubters wrong. How can you say that this dude is not legit? 24-38, 349 passing yards, 3 TDs against Alabama. Number 3 in the nation, guys. Alabama, this team's good. It's a good team. All right, not as good as, obviously not as good as previous years, but they're still a very good team. He goes into Tuscaloosa and puts a whooping on them. The receiving core, I said this last week, this is the strongest receiving core I think I've seen in Texas in the past 10 years. Jatavion Sanders, 5 catches, 114 yards. Adonai Mitchell, 3 catches, 78 yards, 2 TDs. Xavier Worthy as well with a touchdown. I mean, just look at the depth, look at the talent. I think defense also showed up a little bit. There's a couple of mistakes, but overall, I mean, you go into Tuscaloosa and you beat Bama, that's like unheard of. You know, not many teams can do that, especially teams that are outside of the SEC. I know Texas is going in the SEC, but it's an extremely impressive win. They're number 4, I think, in the AP poll now, so it's exciting now to be a Longhorn fan, but it's happened before. So they got to keep level-headed, and we'll see what happens the rest of the season.
Well, I have to say, I'm glad I was wrong. Quinn Ewers proved me that I was wrong. 3 touchdowns, 349 passing yards. He played incredibly well. He looked like he was polished and he was ready to go. I can't say the same for Jalen Milroe. 2 picks. That really
Terrible pitch.
it was bad. Oh yeah, he did not. He was just chucking out the football to me. He was chucking out the football. Was not reading the coverage at all. I really think though the UT's defense really helped the offense because my God, they both sides of the ball were just tiring out Alabama. Like at the end of the game, Alabama was just dying. They were so tired because again, not the help from Jalen Milroe. Those 2 picks. I would just say hot take here. I think Texas can win out. I think they can win out. I think they can beat K-State easy. I don't think Tech can scare them. They did beat a good Oregon team, but this is Texas' season to lose. The Big 12 championship's theirs. They just got one out.
Right.
Oh, well, you know, I predicted them to win. Mullet or no mullet. I always thought that when Ewers had that aura to him, you know, and he proved it. And, you know, part of Texas season, you know, people were doubting Texas before the season, but it's the same thing with Colorado. It was always going to depend on how their quarterback was getting into the system and being comfortable and performing. And now that he's shown that he can do that against a top school like Alabama, you know, I don't doubt that Texas can win the Big 12 and be one of the 4 teams in the college football playoff. So nothing I saw this weekend shocked me really about Texas.
I think the main takeaway from this game is that the mastermind, greatest head coach, college football head coach of all time, Nick Saban, got out coached by Steve Sarkisian. Texas controlled the majority of the game, and every time they would drop the lead, they would regain it. They punched Alabama in the mouth, and like Nick said, this is a great Texas team. Sarkisian has the weapons to run this offense the way he wants finally, and they have Wyoming next, then Baylor, then Kansas. They should win those. They have a ranked Oklahoma after that. We're going to see how they do against them, but I think they can beat them. I don't know if they can run the table, but I think they're going to be really good this year. Quinn Ewers looked good, and the team as a whole looked good. The defense looked good, and Milroe did not look good for Alabama. So
No, and Jalen Milroe definitely had a couple bad snaps that just come fall out of his hands. Unfortunately, UT's cornerbacks were torched. I'm not gonna lie, the wide receivers were just blown right past them. Deep passes, easily mistakes that Jalen Milroe picked up on, but he did go 14 for 27, 51% compared to Quinn Ewers, which was 24 to 38, 63%. He did have 2 interceptions, and my God, I mean, he threw it directly to them. I mean, was he colorblind? Was he seeing the jersey? But anyways, I was really impressed with Quinn Ewers. He was scrambling a lot, chucking it deep. He looked just like how he did last year versus Bama, first half before he got hurt. Great deep ball plays every single time. And Xavier Worthy also, I was impressed by him. Yeah, he had a couple of drop passes, but he looked a lot bigger. He was able to go against a lot of the cornerbacks. In all honesty, he looked great along with Jatavion Sanders. I'm also looking forward to the next couple weeks against Wyoming, K-State, and Baylor. It'll be a great season for Longhorns, but let's not give them too much praise just yet because they are the Longhorns. You never know when they're going to pull that rug underneath you. But I think they played great. Overall, very happy with it.
Should I be completely honest with y'all? Because we could talk about the numbers.
Mr. Ohio State.
We could talk about numbers and we could talk about stats and there's great athletes on both sides. At least if you just pay attention to 24/7 recruiting, which I do. They have great talent all over the field. But aside from all those numbers and basic key takeaways, you know what I said to myself when I turned off the TV and went to bed? Alabama just ain't the same, man. They're just not the same. As an Ohio State fan, like Nick did bring up, they whooped us as they did everybody when they won that 2020 championship. They were the best team. They had the quarterback. They had those 2 great receivers, Devontae Smith, who had that record-breaking wide receiver season, and then Jalen Waddle, who did play in that championship, by the way, Najee Harris and the crew. Since that game, has anyone been afraid of them? Have they looked the same? Even if you watch that Texas game last year, or those 2 games they lost last year against LSU and Tennessee, and now against Texas, how undisciplined do they look? You see all those face masks and offside, like for a Nick Saban team who is the greatest coach of all time. It just doesn't look the same as they did, in the 2012 to 2020 when they were literally in the championship 7 of those 8 years. So I just didn't think it looked the same, Nick. Why the rebuttal?
I don't know if anybody saw Nick Saban's post-game interview. He just looked disappointed.
Yeah.
He was not. He did not. It is not the same Nick Saban that ripping into his players after a decently close. That was only 10.
He was even thanking the press. He was like, "Thanks for everyone for coming out.
We put a good Texas team." Thanks. He was thanking the fans for showing up. Like that's not Nick. That's not the Nick Saban that we.
And that was
hardcore Nick Saban.
And that's not a Nick Saban football team that I watch because all those penalties. That's just not him.
Like that's not stereotypical Bama football that we've come to expect since for 16, 17 years ago.
And I was dead wrong because last week I was like, "There's nothing scarier than a pissed off Nick Saban team." They haven't won they haven't gone more than 3 years without winning a championship since 2009. But dude, I am not afraid of that team. I will be the first to admit I don't think there's anybody in college right now that looks head and shoulders better than anybody. You go Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Bama, Texas. Everyone has their flaws. I mean, it seems like every year, especially in college football, just because of how scheduling and player, rankings and just talent separation, you kind of come out the gates knowing, okay, those teams are good. USC is blowing some teams out, Penn State. But college football, man, it's just there's not one team where I'm like, oh yeah, they're running away with it. Rylan, would you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. what there hasn't really been is honestly the best standout performance given from any team this year that I would say was Colorado versus TCU in week 1. Other than that, what game from any big school has like really just blown y'all away?
Well, I mean, I would say it is impressive to win in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd say those are easily the 2 biggest wins.
Oh yeah, well, including the Texas game as well.
Especially because before I let Connor say what he wants to say, no, and this is his team. Because this is the last year you only have 4 teams in the playoff. What's the argument and going to be the debate in end of November, early December, when every team has 1 loss and you're arguing who should get that final 4th spot, which is a debate every year, as you guys may know. Ohio State got the benefit last year. Several times it's been Oklahoma and Notre Dame when they had no deserving reason to go. But Connor, what about you?
Yeah, it's gonna go backtrack a little bit, but about Nick Saban. I mean, if you look at him on the sidelines during the game, he just looked like just down, disappointed, just like a shell. And I think that encapsulates Alabama. They're a shell of themselves. They're not the same Alabama. I agree with Luke. I'm not afraid. I don't think anyone's afraid of him. And that's crazy because they ruined a lot of people's childhoods. They ruined mine. They ruined a lot. You get tired of seeing them win, but in regards to Texas, I think the key here, they gotta stay level headed. They can't get too complacent. I mean, they did beat Bama in Tuscaloosa. That's impressive. I say it's probably going to be one of the top 3 most impressive ones of the season already. I say down the line, doesn't matter what games go on. I think it's going to be one of the impressive. I think it's going to be the start of the resurgence.
And I feel like it's like I feel like it's coming across like we're hating on Nick Saban. Like there's nothing wrong with saying his dominant run, which lasted this long, winning 7 titles. Like it's going to come to an end someday. It's okay. But I think that's now. Brandon, any thoughts before you
being in the end, I want to hear y'all's take. Do y'all think maybe like showing the softness from Nick Saban could hint maybe towards possible retirement? I mean,
Now, that man gonna die on the side.
I know. We used to believe that, but we also used to believe that Nick Saban does not let up, and if a mistake happens, he's going to lay it into his players. I mean, he doesn't look like the same Nick Saban.
I mean, he's his age. I don't know off the top of my head. 71. Okay, yeah, he's 71. He's going to retire at some point. I mean, I being 71, he has his own family. Does he wake up, sees he has 7 rings on his fingers, like, you know what? I don't want to go yell at a bunch of 20, 21-year-olds for 5 hours a day. I don't want to go recruit this kid in California and then hop on a jet to, Ohio. I want to stay home. So for me, I don't think he's going to retire now, but by the time 2026 hits, that would be. I don't see him coaching further than that, Connor.
Yeah, no, I agree for sure. I think every dog has his day, right? I mean, and I've seen Alabama fans complaining, and I'm like, guys, no, you can't stay on top forever. You cannot. It just it doesn't work like that in any sport, in anything in society. It doesn't most of the time. So I think Saban, I think you're right. I think he will by 2026 retire. I think it's just Alabama's going to need a reset. That's going to be hard. He's the greatest college football coach ever. I'm just going to say that right now. What he's done with Alabama is remarkable. I just think it's time maybe for him to, and for the program just to move on and try and reset because he's not going to be around forever. It's just, that's the process of life. Not saying anything about his age right now. I'm not trying to be like that. I'm just, just how football works, college football especially.
I was just going to say they got to start looking for the next one because they had Bear Bryant and they got Nick Saban. They got to start looking for the next coach. Might need to start right now.
I was just gonna say, Alabama's been very fortunate for, damn near 67 years, having 2 of the greatest coaches to ever play and to ever coach college football, Bear Bryant and Nick Saban.
Well, the Longhorns weren't the only team from Texas to have its loyal, diehard fans feeling like they won it all after this weekend. Because America's team, the Dallas Cowboys, beat the mighty New York Football Giants 40-0 last night at MetLife Stadium. Of course, the Cowboys 40 ball has every Texas fan feeling like Thanos collecting all the Infinity Stones, invincible. They're waking up invincible today on Monday morning. So Rylan, I'll start with you. I'll ask you first. Which Texas team's big win over the weekend showed a sign of what's to come for the rest of the year?
Oh man, I'm not a Cowboys fan by any stretch. Like I don't like them. But I think it was the Cowboys to go to New York on Sunday Night Football in Week 1 opener and do what they did to a Giants team that made the playoffs last year. I think it just confirmed what everybody was thinking about them, especially on defense going into the season. My defensive player of the year pick, Micah Parsons, absolutely destroyed Daniel Jones. And the whole defense just seemed to be clicking. I mean, I watched every minute of that game because I had nothing better to do. It was probably one of the worst performances I've ever seen from any sports team in my entire life. Mm-hmm. I mean, the score was 40-0, and they were still getting the ball punched out in the third quarter. I mean, not every flag, every turnover, everything was going wrong for that Giants team. But I also think that it was because the Cowboys are just that good.
Man, as a Cowboys fan, as a Lawhorn and Cowboys fan and Roadrunner fan, it's a perfect weekend. It's a trifecta. But man, that Cowboys defense, they look legit. I mean, obviously, I love Michael Parsons. I think he's going to win the Defensive Player of the Year. I think he had a standout performance, but the likes of Trevon Diggs, the likes of Stephon Gilmore as well, Dorrance Armstrong, DeMarcus Lawrence, there's so many guys in that defense. And then in terms of offense, so it's a new offense this year. Mike McCarthy's making the play calling on the offensive side of the ball. I know people are throwing some shade at Dak a little bit, and he went 13 to 24, 143 yards. The conditions weren't great. I'm gonna say that it was raining the whole game. Terrible conditions. If you're a quarterback trying to throw the ball, it's not fun at all. But I think people got to give it a little time with the new offense. I think it's going to click. I do have faith in Dak, just enough faith. But I think they have enough weapons on offense where they could really be solid contenders. And I know I'm a Cowboys fan. They're going to call me delusional. I get it. I get it. I just think if the defense can keep on playing the way it is, if they can get the offense clicking, I think they can make a run. Not saying at the Super Bowl. I think they can make it at an NFC Championship.
Well, it actually shocks me to learn that Cowboys fans were ripping on Dak for that performance last night. I mean, what did they want him to do? I mean, before you could blink, you're up 26-0. So the stat line, if you're box score watching, it was underwhelming, I guess. But I mean, he didn't need to do anything. There's no reason to risk a turnover by throwing it too much when you're already up 20 plus. Just give the ball to Tony Pollard, run little screenplays, just manage the game and try to get out of there healthy when you're winning like that. So that shocked me for you to say that Cowboys fans were upset with him.
Yeah, some of them don't think before they speak. But no, I noticed that too. That's a lot of plays that are giving Dak easy looks. I saw yesterday, and it's just consistent. It's convenient for him. He's just not trying to make these throws that are just crazy. It's all about just efficiency. I think that's the whole key thing of this offense. Like Tony Pollard, he had 14 carries, 7 yards. He had 2 TDs. I mean, and like you said, they didn't have to do much. Defense just dominated. I mean,
that was special teams.
Yeah, that was one of the worst offensive line performances that I've ever seen from the Giants. It was absolutely diabolical.
And it's even amplified more by the fact that you have all-pro left tackle Andrew Thomas on that line. You have top 5 pick not Ryan Neal. What's his name? Evan Neal. Sorry, Ryan Neal. And they just absolutely obliterated him. Mark Lewinsky too is a decent guard. They have players on that O line, but it just didn't. You couldn't tell. You wouldn't think they got all undrafted people on that O line the way they played last night.
I mean, Dallas showed out. They showed out against a playoff team. A playoff team from last year. If Dallas can play how they played yesterday, they're going to give the Eagles a good hell later down in the division. I mean, I'm looking at their schedule right now. I mean, I think they could beat the Jets next week. They're definitely going to beat the Cardinals next week. They're tanking hard. Patriots could go how they gave. The Patriots played a good game against Philadelphia yesterday. Rematch of the divisional against the 49ers on October 8th. That's going to be a good game. But the Chargers, the Rams, I mean, the Rams, they showed out, not too bad against Seattle, but the Cowboys look good, and I think they can make a run for it if they play consistently how they did yesterday. So,
Aramis, before I let you speak, please be on my side when I say that Texas, their win is definitely going to carry them for the rest of the year further than the Cowboys.
I completely agree with you. I mean, we've seen the Cowboys over the last 2 years dominate teams. The defense is always going to be good. We saw them 2 years ago beat the Eagles 51-26. I know they had a couple more dominant victories that year, but last year destroyed the Vikings. I think it was 40-3, and then they also beat the Colts 54-19. And then in the wild card round, Dak Prescott played the game of his career against the Buccaneers. If you were to take that away, you would think that they would win the Super Bowl. What happened the next week? Lost against the 49ers. And I think that Texas's win, it's more impressive. I just believe that the Cowboys offense, I don't know. I mean, they need to be more consistent. I think Dak needs to be more consistent. We're going to see how they're going to play next week against the Jets. The defense, we know what we have in them. We know that they're going to be good. But I think Dak needs to be a lot more consistent. And I think I need to see how this offense is going to look under Mike McCarthy.
I don't have a lot to say much about the Cowboys, except delusional. Because I'm every year it's the same thing, man. You beat up on some team really badly. You hear the uproar in Texas. It's Cowboys a Super Bowl. I'm tired of the letdown. I'm not a Cowboys fan, but I'm not a hater on them. But I need to see them play like this against someone better. I mean, the Giants, like you said, their offense was getting stomped by that defense too. I need to see this against someone else. I would love to see them play this way against the Eagles. It'd be a good matchup, but come on, the Giants. I need to see something better than that. But again, the uproar with going to the Super Bowl, that's just delusional. I'd like to see this going into week 2, see how they play against who do they play next?
Jets.
Yeah, I'd like to see how all this uproar versus them and see how they could play. But other than that, great win. UT's win was better.
Especially to bounce off that, the Jets should have a better defense than the Giants did. But I feel like we're looking to as, oh, look how they played against the Giants. And instead of, oh, wait, college football, how we were talking earlier, it's based on voting. What's going to matter in November when they're tallying all these wins? What's going to, oh, they did this. If Texas, I don't think the Big 12 conference is that great. It's not the SEC. It's not the Big 10, even though the SEC is dropped off this year, as we could tell in this out-of-conference play. But they have a really, they have a schedule where they could win out, and that'd be totally realistic, especially based on their talent and, a great start to the season. But even if they lose and slip up, which all of y'all are basically hinting at, Texas may do, it's just what they do. They slip up. What's going to matter in December when they have one loss, Michigan has one loss to Ohio State, USC has a loss to Oregon? What's going to happen when only Georgia's
Utah.
Yeah, when Georgia and Ohio State are the only 2 undefeated teams, who's going to fill spots 3, 4, and be the first team left out? So I think it's the clear answer is Texas here because it's a beauty contest. One in the NFL is just win loss. We see teams win and lose all the time. I mean, you saw the Bengals lost to the Browns, and that could be a sign of what's to come. But we also saw the Chiefs lose, and we saw a bunch of teams who you think would be a perennial contender lose. So I think it's easier to say, oh, in college football, you have this team who beat number 3 Alabama, when the Giants are, the Giants. Connor, what do you think about that?
You're making sense until you said Georgia and Ohio State would be the 2 undefeated teams. But no, I agree. I think when, like you said, November, we'll get to the nitty gritty of it, get to the final rankings. And if Texas is up there, if they keep on doing what they're doing, and that win in Tuscaloosa is going to look
It's going to look really good on that resume, especially when Georgia's playing cupcake.
That's what I'm saying. And they have a snowball schedule. Why is Georgia always have a snowball schedule?
I hear you, man.
And don't even leave out Michigan. They're kind of a little soft on their schedule too.
They're terribly soft.
So,
Georgia at least plays LSU. Georgia Tech. We'll see what they're made of in November. But at least Michigan does play Penn State. They at least play Ohio State. But they've dominated those 2 teams the last 2 years. Just calling it how I see it. Rylan, do you have any problem with what I said about Texas feeling better at their win than the Cowboys should about theirs?
No, I think you're right, low key, because of the way that college football
works.
It works, right? But I think y'all undermined the win against the Giants a little too much. I mean, this is a good division, which I think all 4 of the teams could realistically make the playoffs in a weak NFC. So this game will matter. And to blow out an NFL team 40-0, it's uncommon because these NFL teams are comprised of the best college football players from, across the nation. And if you look at the Cowboys schedule, Jets, 49ers, Chargers, Eagles, the Eagles twice, the Dolphins, the Bills, the Lions, the Seahawks. They have a really tough schedule, and I think they're going to be a good team. like if they get into the playoffs, that they can go all the way. But they won't enter in with an impressive record. So I think this one's going to matter a bunch.
Yeah.
College football is funny. It's always been. We prioritize these big deal games, but I think what is it? I think in the pros, again, like Rylan said, these are the best players in the whole damn world. 40-0 against a professional organization like the Giants. Playoff team last year. They didn't play. They had to earn their spot last year to get into the playoffs. Now Dallas to come into MetLife under those conditions, 40-0. I don't know.
Man, because did you see how they scored those touchdowns though, and then a pick six and then a block? Like it just didn't feel right, Aramis. I mean, am I wrong to think that?
No, you're not.
I mean, I would like to say, like, I think the win was impressive, but I've seen them destroy teams like that before, and then come the playoffs, they lose to the 49ers. So I've seen them be this good, and if you watch the game, the Giants just had a horrible game. I mean, I was listening to the broadcast. I think it was Mike Tirico and Chris Collinsworth. I mean, they were sounded miserable calling that game.
They were thinking of things to say.
Exactly. And I remember Chris Collinsworth saying, like, the Cowboys were destroying the Giants. Yeah. So it just all around was a bad game for the Giants. It looked like Dable didn't even prepare them for the first game. And also, I would like to say, stat of the day, they faced their first playoff team on the road. They faced 5 more playoff teams on the road this season. So we're going to see how good the Cowboys are. Their opponent win percentage for this year, I looked it up earlier, it's .549. So they have a tough schedule. So yeah, we're going to see how good they are. They have a bunch of tough games. They have a good slate of teams to go up against. And the first one comes next week against the Jets.
Well, just like the Giants, there's a lot of sad fans all over this country waking up today on Monday morning, feeling like their season's over when it just started. Because before we get out of here, I know there's some frustrated football fans sitting amongst me. Briefly, Rylan, again, I'll start with you. Looking at this weekend slate of games, which final score or story of the weekend do you feel like getting off your chest?
Oh, well, I mean, it's the Seahawks versus the Rams. I mean, you have a team in the Seahawks that surprised everybody by making the playoffs last year after trading Russell Wilson. And they only added on to that roster. They had a top 5 pick in Devon Witherspoon out of Illinois. They had a top 20 pick with Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State. 2 players that were considered to be the top of their position in the draft. And they added Draymond Jones from the Broncos on the D-line. That was a huge contract. So you expected them to get better and beat a Rams team that lost Jalen Ramsey, that has Matthew Stafford coming off of an injury that at the time when they first diagnosed it could have been career-threatening. And the performance that they gave was just all-time bad. I mean, there was the graphic that said in the second half, the Rams had 259 yards to Seattle's 3 yards in the second half. I mean, if it weren't for the Giants playing how they played on Sunday Night Football, Seattle will be the most embarrassing performance of the year already so far. And they had both their tackles go down with injury, which after the game would turn out to be not big injuries, so they just sat out for no reason. And it was just embarrassing. They said after the game, Geno Smith said after the game that the Rams wanted it more. How do you admit that? How do you come out after that performance and admit that they wanted it more? I mean, what are we running here?
Yeah, exactly. It's just piss poor effort. I mean, the first half we get a field goal, DK gets a touchdown, another field goal. Okay, we're looking decent, right? We go to halftime, we're up on them, and then we go into second quarter, and then I guess they really did want it more because they laid it into us. And I mean, this was just embarrassing. The defense was just letting up. It was touchdown, punt, field goal, punt, touchdown. But we're just giving it up. I mean, easily. It was point. They got a point at least every time they got the ball in that second half. Completely embarrassing. I mean, I don't have much word to say about it. I don't want to say anything much about it. It was embarrassing.
Well, I mean, one of the Seattle's biggest weaknesses last year was that they were giving up, I think, like 150 rushing yards per game. And we actually did a really good job against Cam Akers and the Rams rushing attack. Who was at wide receiver for the Rams? They had Tutu Atwell, which is like a 3rd-round pick, no Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Who? Explain to me how he has 119 yards against. Okay, admittedly, it was not Tariq Woolen's fault. Sorry. Tariq Woolen was only targeted twice in that game. He gave 1 catch. Okay. Trey Brown and Kobe Bryant and Julian Love just absolute garbage. They couldn't guard 2 homeless people if they lined up against him in that game.
Okay, right. Now, look, I see the frustration, but you got to think this defense is very young. They're still kind of working all the kinks out. Yeah, I don't think the Rams are all that good this year, but they are very young. They're going to give up some plays. They were some pretty big plays. I mean, Tyreek Woolen, 1 of 2. They're every one of them just young.
And bouncing off of that, I feel like it's kind of premature to say that was already, besides the Giants, the worst performance of the year. Because let me tell you about these Bengals, man. I watched this team for 3.5 hours with the highest hopes of the world, expecting, this dominant run that everyone thinks we should have. And our Cincinnati Reds baseball team scored more runs than we did points on the football field. T. Higgins had as many yards as I did sitting on the couch in San Antonio, Texas. There was nothing moving. I see my division of rival over there, Aramis, sitting across from me laughing. Aramis, how did you feel about this weekend?
Please, let me talk about this. The Ravens yesterday won 25-9, and I am not happy about it. And I'm going to talk why at the end. But first, I'd like to give a shout-out to the Texans. They played a great game. They only scored 9 points, but it's against our defense. Roquan Smith, 16 tackles, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss. I think he set a record for tackles in a first game of the season. Patrick Queen, 1 sack. David Ojabo coming back. He had a strip sack. And the offense, I'm not going to really talk too much about them. I know they're still getting used to offensive coordinator Todd Monken. Lamar is also rusty. He didn't play in the preseason. 17 of 22, 169 passing yards, 1 interception. The best player on our offense yesterday was definitely Zay Flowers. I'm going to need to get his jersey. 9 receptions, 78 receiving yards. He played amazing. Also, Justice Hill, 2 rushing touchdowns. So overall, it was an okay team win, but I want to give a shout out to J.K. Dobbins. Tore his Achilles yesterday. I can't imagine how he must be feeling.
Yeah.
Wishing a speedy recovery.
Hate to see that from a former Buckeye. Hate to see that. Nick.
One more thing. I'd also like to wish a speedy recovery to Marcus Williams. He's also going to be out for a couple games with the pec injury. And then also Tyler Linderbaum and Ronnie Stanley as well.
Absolutely. What about you, Nick? What did you like or not like from this past weekend?
Well, I'll admit it on here, and this will forever be on tape. I'm a Cardinals fan.
No.
Right?
Okay.
So I don't have much to say. I mean, we kept up with
My condolences.
yeah, take out a rosary for me. I can't say much. We kept up with a okay Washington squad.
Race for Kyler.
For
Caleb.
I mean, tank. I'm for the tank. So that's it for me.
Well, obviously, I like the Cowboys score quite a bit. But if we had to go over a game that I didn't like,
Everything.
the Bears, man.
Awful.
The Bears.
Talked all that. mess for that.
38-20 loss to the Packers. Man, if you're going to talk all that mess, and then well, this is going to be our year. We're going to be back in contention. And then to have a performance like that. I mean, everyone wants to see Justin Fields. They know how he is with the good receivers around him. Like yesterday, man. 24-37, 216 passing yards, a touchdown, a pick. Just didn't look good. Like, everything did not look good from the Bears. I mean, I'll give credit to Jordan Love, though. He went off yesterday.
Looked nice.
245 yards, 3 TDs. Aaron Jones got him the ball a lot in the second half. In the second half, and he scored a touchdown, nice little run. So, Packers look decent, but the Bears, man, that's the biggest disappointment.
Fire Matt Eberflus.
Fire him.
Yeah. That offense looked horrible
The
yesterday.
offensive line, too. Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness.
And just like the Packers own the Bears, UTSA owns Texas State.
True that.
Yeah.
Let's
Yep.
go. 5-0, baby.
5-0. All right, so we're pushing 45 minutes here on the pod. It's been a lot of fun to come in here, post, this weekend's games, talk all this with y'all. We'll be back for an episode coming out on Thursday. Please check that out. You guys have a wonderful day. Thanks.
Thanks for watching. Click our logo to subscribe or click the videos for more from the Paisano. Leave a comment letting us know your thoughts and what you'd like to see us cover next.